Sarah Mitchell had always been different from other 12-year-old girls in Millbrook Valley. While her classmates spent their afternoons glued to phones and video games, Sarah preferred the company of her aging German shepherd, Rex. The bond between them was extraordinary, forged through years of adventures in the rolling hills that surrounded their small mountain town. Rex was no ordinary dog. At 14 years old, he moved with the careful deliberation that comes with age. But his amber eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him legendary in their community. Years ago, before arthritis slowed his powerful frame, Rex had been a search and rescue dog with the local volunteer fire department. He had saved countless lives, finding lost hikers in treacherous terrain and locating survivors after avalanches. Though officially retired, Rex's nose remained as keen as ever, and his protective instincts toward Sarah were unwavering. The morning of October 15th started like any other Saturday. Sarah's parents, both busy with their jobs at the local lumber mill, had given her permission for another one of her routine hikes with Rex. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles and dying leaves. Sarah packed her small backpack with water bottles, granola bars, and Rex's favorite treats, then clipped his worn leather leash to his collar. "Come on, old boy," she whispered, scratching behind his graying ears. "Let's see what adventures we can find today." They set off toward the less traveled trails that wound through the dense forest behind their house. Sarah loved these paths because they were quiet, away from the noise of motorcycles and ATVs that had begun disturbing the more popular hiking routes. Rex seemed to understand her preference for solitude, his tail wagging slowly as they walked deeper into the wilderness. The forest was particularly beautiful that morning. Shafts of golden sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating dancing patterns on the forest floor. Sarah hummed quietly to herself while Rex moved with purpose beside her, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting scents or to rest his aging joints. Despite his advanced years, he remained alert and focused, his ears constantly moving to catch sounds that Sarah's human hearing couldn't detect. About 2 miles into their hike, they reached Sarah's favorite spot, a small clearing beside a babbling creek where wildflowers still bloomed despite the approaching winter. She had discovered this place 3 years ago and had kept it as her secret sanctuary. Today, however, something felt different. Rex had stopped abruptly at the edge of the clearing, his body rigid with tension. Sarah noticed the change immediately. Rex's ears were forward, and a low rumble emanated from deep in his chest. This wasn't his usual alertness to wildlife or unfamiliar hikers. This was something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of Sarah's neck stand up. "What is it, Rex?" she whispered, following his intense gaze toward a cluster of thick bushes on the far side of the clearing. Rex began moving forward with renewed energy, his arthritis seemingly forgotten in the face of whatever had captured his attention. Sarah followed carefully, her heart beginning to pound. As they approached the bushes, she could hear Rex's breathing becoming more rapid and shallow, the way it used to sound when he was working a scent during his search and rescue days. Then she saw it, barely visible through the dense undergrowth, a flash of dark blue fabric that didn't belong in the natural palette of the forest. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as Rex pushed through the bushes, whimpering softly in a way she had never heard before. What they discovered on the other side would change everything. Lying motionless on a bed of fallen leaves was a man in a police uniform, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Beside him, equally still, lay a beautiful Belgian Malinois wearing a K9 unit vest. Both appeared to be unconscious, and there were no obvious signs of what had happened to them. Sarah's first instinct was to run. She was just a child, alone in the wilderness with her elderly dog, confronted with a situation that seemed impossibly serious and dangerous. But Rex had other ideas. The old dog moved toward the unconscious officer with purpose, sniffing carefully around the man's head and chest, then moving to examine the police dog with gentle concern. Sarah's hands shook as she knelt beside the officer, trying to remember everything she had learned in the basic first aid course her school had required. The man's name tag read, Officer Martinez, and his radio was crackling with static, though she couldn't make out any clear words. His pulse was weak but steady when she pressed her fingers against his wrist the way her teacher had shown them. The police dog, whose vest identified him as Bruno, was breathing but completely unresponsive. Rex circled both victims methodically, his nose working constantly, gathering information that Sarah couldn't begin to interpret. Whatever had happened here, Rex seemed to understand it better than she did. Sarah realized she was facing the most important decision of her young life. Her cell phone had no signal in this remote location, and running back to town for help would take at least an hour. By then, these two might be beyond saving, but staying here alone with two unconscious strangers felt terrifying and overwhelming. Rex made the decision for her. The old dog positioned himself between Sarah and the unconscious officer, his body language clearly indicating that he had no intention of leaving. His eyes met hers with an intensity that reminded her of all the stories her father had told about Rex's heroic days, about how he had never failed to help someone in need. Sarah took a deep breath and made her choice. She would stay and help, just as Rex had taught her through years of watching him work. Whatever had happened to Officer Martinez and Bruno, they needed immediate assistance, and she and Rex might be their only hope. As she knelt beside the unconscious men, Sarah noticed details that would prove crucial in the hours to come. There were no obvious injuries, no blood or signs of violence, but something about their condition seemed wrong in a way she couldn't quite identify. The forest around them was too quiet, and Rex's continued agitation suggested that danger might still be present. Sarah knew that this moment would test everything she had learned about courage, responsibility, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their loyal companions. She also sensed that whatever had brought Officer Martinez and Bruno to this remote location was far from over, and that she and Rex were about to become part of something much larger and more dangerous than a simple hiking adventure. Sarah knelt beside Officer Martinez, her mind racing as she tried to process the situation. Rex continued his methodical investigation, moving between the unconscious officer and his canine partner, with the focused intensity of his old working days. The forest around them remained eerily quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Officer Martinez appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and a muscular build that suggested years of physical training. His uniform was neat and undamaged, which struck Sarah as odd. If he had fallen or been attacked, surely there would be some sign of struggle or injury. His radio continued to crackle with intermittent communications, but the signals were too weak and garbled for Sarah to understand. Bruno, the police dog, was even more puzzling. The Belgian Malinois was clearly a working dog in peak physical condition, his muscles well defined beneath his glossy coat. Like his handler, he showed no obvious signs of trauma or injury. His breathing was steady but unnaturally deep, almost as if he were in some kind of drug-induced sleep, rather than unconscious from an accident. Rex suddenly froze, his entire body going rigid as his nose caught something in the air. Sarah watched as her old companion's behavior shifted from concerned investigation to active alertness. His hackles rose slightly, and he began a low, continuous growl that made Sarah's skin crawl. Whatever Rex was sensing, it was something that posed an immediate threat. Sarah followed Rex's gaze toward the dense tree line beyond the clearing. At first, she saw nothing but shadows and undergrowth, but then a flash of movement caught her attention. Someone or something was moving through the forest, trying to stay hidden but not quite succeeding. Rex's growl intensified, and Sarah realized they were being watched. Her heart hammering against her ribs, Sarah made a quick decision. She grabbed Officer Martinez's radio from his belt and pressed what she hoped was the transmit button. Static filled the air, but she could hear voices in the background, distant and unclear. "Hello?" she whispered urgently into the radio. "This is Sarah Mitchell. I found a police officer and his dog unconscious in the forest. They need help. Can anyone hear me?" The response was immediate but frustrating. Voices crackled through the static asking for her location and status, but the signal was too weak for clear communication. Sarah could make out fragments. Officer Martinez missing. Last known location. Search teams deployed. Rex's behavior became increasingly agitated. The old dog positioned himself protectively in front of Sarah, while keeping his attention fixed on the tree line. His experience told him something that Sarah's human instincts could only guess at. They were in danger, and whatever had rendered Officer Martinez and Bruno unconscious might still be active in the area. Sarah noticed something else that chilled her to the bone. Both Officer Martinez and Bruno had small, almost invisible puncture wounds on their necks, barely visible beneath their collars. The marks were tiny, like needle pricks, but they were definitely there. Someone had deliberately incapacitated both the officer and his dog with some kind of drug or tranquilizer. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't an accident or medical emergency. Officer Martinez and Bruno had been attacked, probably while investigating something in this remote area. And whoever was responsible might still be nearby, watching and waiting. Rex's growling suddenly stopped, replaced by an even more alarming behavior. The old dog began backing toward Sarah, his eyes never leaving the forest edge, his body language screaming danger. In all her years with Rex, Sarah had never seen him display this level of fear and protective instinct simultaneously. Then she heard it, the soft crack of a branch breaking under someone's weight, coming from the direction Rex was watching. The sound was deliberate, careful, but not quite careful enough. Someone was indeed moving through the forest, trying to approach their location without being detected. Sarah's mind raced through her options. Running seemed impossible with two unconscious victims who needed immediate medical attention. Hiding was equally futile in the open clearing. Fighting was out of the question for a 12-year-old girl and an elderly dog against unknown assailants. But doing nothing meant potentially becoming victims themselves. She tried the radio again, speaking as quietly as possible while still hoping to be heard. "Please, if anyone can hear me, Officer Martinez is unconscious near Miller Creek, about 2 miles north of the old logging road. Someone attacked him and his dog. We need help immediately." This time the response was clearer. "Sarah Mitchell, this is dispatch. We have search teams looking for Officer Martinez. Stay with him and keep yourself safe. Help is coming." But help felt very far away as Sarah watched the shadows moving closer to their position. Rex had moved into a defensive stance she remembered from his training days, his aged body still capable of protecting those he loved. Despite his arthritis and gray muzzle, the old dog was preparing to fight if necessary. Sarah realized that Officer Martinez's service weapon was still in its holster. The thought of using it crossed her mind, but she had no training with firearms and knew she would likely pose more danger to herself than to any attacker. Instead, she focused on what she could do. Keep trying to establish radio communication and trust in Rex's legendary instincts and abilities. The movement in the forest stopped abruptly, as if whoever was there had realized they were being detected. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the sounds had been. Sarah could feel eyes watching them, calculating, planning the next move in whatever deadly game was unfolding. Bruno stirred slightly, letting out a soft whimper that gave Sarah a surge of hope. If the police dog was beginning to wake up, perhaps the effects of whatever had been used on him were temporary. She gently shook Officer Martinez's shoulder, hoping for some sign of consciousness, but he remained unresponsive. Rex suddenly looked directly at Sarah, and in his intelligent amber eyes, she saw something that took her breath away. The old dog was making a decision, weighing risks and options with the strategic mind that had made him such an effective search and rescue dog. He was planning something, and Sarah sensed that whatever it was would require courage from both of them. The radio crackled again with a stronger signal. "Sarah, this is Sergeant Williams. We have teams converging on your location, but it will take at least 30 minutes to reach you. Can you describe what you see around you? Are you in immediate danger?" Sarah looked at Rex, then at the unconscious officer and his partner, then toward the threatening shadows in the forest. Everything about this situation screamed danger, but she also knew that Officer Martinez and Bruno would die without immediate help. Her answer would determine not just her own fate, but the lives of everyone involved in this mysterious and frightening situation. "Sergeant Williams, there's someone in the forest watching us," Sarah whispered into the radio, her voice barely audible. "Rex knows they're there. Officer Martinez and Bruno both have tiny puncture wounds on their necks. I think someone drugged them." The response came quickly, filled with urgency. "Sarah, listen carefully. You and Rex need to find cover immediately. Do not approach anyone who comes out of those woods. We're sending helicopters to your location, but you need to stay hidden until we arrive." But Rex had already made his decision. The old German shepherd moved with sudden purpose toward Officer Martinez, grasping the unconscious man's collar in his powerful jaws. Sarah watched in amazement as Rex began trying to drag the much heavier officer toward a cluster of large boulders at the edge of the clearing. Despite his age and arthritis, Rex's determination was absolute. Sarah understood immediately. Rex was trying to move both victims to a more defensible position, using his search and rescue training to assess the tactical situation. She rushed to help, grabbing Officer Martinez under his arms while Rex continued pulling from the front. Together, they managed to move the unconscious officer several feet toward better cover. Bruno was lighter, and Sarah managed to half carry, half drag the police dog to join his handler behind the protective rocks. Both victims were still unconscious, but Bruno's breathing seemed to be getting stronger, and Sarah thought she saw his eyelids flutter briefly. From their new position, Sarah had a better view of the forest around them. What she saw made her blood run cold. There were at least 3 figures moving through the trees, staying low and trying to use the underbrush for concealment. They were definitely human, dressed in dark clothing that made them difficult to spot, and they were coordinating their movements, working as a team to surround the clearing. Rex positioned himself at the gap between 2 large boulders, his body blocking the most likely approach route to their hiding spot. His behavior had shifted into full protection mode, every muscle tense and ready. The years seemed to fall away from the old dog as his training and instincts took over completely. Sarah tried the radio again. "Sergeant Williams, there are at least 3 people surrounding us. They're moving like they know what they're doing. Rex and I got Officer Martinez and Bruno behind some rocks, but I don't know how long we can stay hidden." "Sarah, you're being incredibly brave. The helicopters are 12 minutes out. Whatever happens, do not leave your cover. These people are extremely dangerous, and Officer Martinez was investigating a major criminal operation when he disappeared." The pieces began falling into place in Sarah's mind. Officer Martinez hadn't simply gotten lost or had an accident. He had been tracking criminals in this remote area, and they had captured him and Bruno. The puncture wounds suggested they had been drugged and possibly interrogated. But why were they left unconscious in the forest instead of being killed or taken prisoner? Rex suddenly let out a sharp bark, his attention focused on a specific point in the tree line. Sarah followed his gaze and saw one of the figures stepping partially into the open. It was a man wearing military-style clothing and carrying what looked like some kind of weapon. Even from a distance, Sarah could see that he was scanning the clearing methodically, looking for signs of Officer Martinez and his dog. The man made a hand signal to his unseen companions, then began moving directly toward their hiding spot. Rex's hackles rose to their full height, and a deep, threatening growl rumbled from his chest. Sarah had never heard Rex make a sound quite like it, primal and warning and absolutely serious. Officer Martinez suddenly stirred, his eyes opening halfway and his lips moving silently. Sarah leaned close to him, hoping he was regaining consciousness, but his movements were sluggish and confused. Whatever drug had been used on him was still affecting his coordination and awareness. "Officer Martinez," Sarah whispered urgently, "can you hear me? There are bad people looking for you. We're hiding behind rocks, but they're getting closer." Martinez's eyes focused on Sarah with great effort. When he spoke, his voice was thick and slurred. "Drug? In the neck. They wanted information about the lab." He tried to sit up but couldn't manage it, his muscles still too affected by whatever chemical had been used on him. Bruno was also beginning to show signs of awakening. The police dog's eyes opened partially, and he lifted his head slightly before letting it drop back down. But Sarah could see intelligence returning to his gaze, the same focused awareness she recognized in Rex. The approaching man was now close enough for Sarah to see details of his appearance. He was older, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested years of outdoor work. What frightened Sarah most was the cold, professional way he moved and searched. This wasn't some random criminal. This was someone with military or law enforcement training being used for illegal purposes. Rex made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of maintaining his defensive position, the old dog suddenly bolted from cover and charged directly at the approaching man. Despite his age, Rex moved with startling speed and power, his deep bark echoing through the forest as he launched himself at the criminal. The man was clearly not expecting an attack from an elderly German shepherd. Rex hit him center mass, knocking him backward and sending his weapon flying into the underbrush. The two rolled on the ground together, Rex's years of training evident in the way he went for the man's weapon arm, preventing him from drawing any backup weapons. Sarah watched in terror and amazement as her gentle, aging companion transformed into the formidable working dog he had once been. Rex's attack had bought them precious time, but she knew the old dog couldn't sustain a physical fight for long against a younger, larger opponent. The commotion brought immediate responses from the other hidden criminals. Sarah could hear them crashing through the forest, abandoning stealth for speed as they rushed to help their companion. Rex's heroic charge had revealed their position. but it had also scattered their enemies and disrupted whatever plan they had been executing. "Officer Martinez, you have to try to wake up," Sarah urged desperately. "Rex is fighting for us, but more are coming." Martinez struggled to focus, his training as a police officer fighting against the lingering effects of the drug. With tremendous effort, he managed to reach for his radio and press the emergency button, sending an automatic distress signal with their exact GPS coordinates. Bruno was also responding to the crisis, struggling to his feet with the determination that made him an effective K-9 officer. The police dog was still unsteady, but Sarah could see the intelligence and loyalty that had made him Martinez's partner burning in his eyes. The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly filled the air, much closer than Sarah had expected. Help was coming, but the question remained whether it would arrive in time to save Rex from the dangerous situation he had thrown himself into to protect them all. The sound of helicopters grew louder as Rex continued his desperate struggle with the criminal. Despite his age, the German Shepherd's years of training and his fierce protective instincts gave him advantages that his opponent hadn't expected. Rex had managed to keep the man pinned and disarmed, but Sarah could see that the old dog was tiring quickly. Bruno, still fighting the effects of the drug, managed to stand on shaking legs. The Belgian Malinois looked toward his handler, then at Sarah, and finally at Rex. Even in his compromised state, Bruno understood what was happening. His partner was in danger and innocent people needed protection. Officer Martinez was struggling to overcome the chemical fog in his brain. With great effort, he managed to speak more clearly. "Sarah, listen to me. These men are part of a drug operation we've been tracking for months. They have a lab somewhere in these mountains, and they've already killed to protect it." The information hit Sarah like a cold wave. Rex wasn't just fighting some random criminal. He was battling someone who had already committed murder and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. Her brave, elderly companion was facing the most dangerous opponent of his long career. Two more figures emerged from the forest, moving quickly toward Rex and his opponent. One of them carried what looked like a tranquilizer gun, similar to what must have been used on Officer Martinez and Bruno. Sarah realized they intended to drug Rex the same way they had incapacitated the others. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed a handful of rocks from around their hiding spot and began throwing them as hard as she could at the approaching criminals. Her aim was better than she expected, and one of the stones struck the man with the tranquilizer gun in the shoulder, causing him to stumble and miss his shot at Rex. "That's my dog," Sarah shouted with 12-year-old fury, continuing to pelt the men with rocks. "Leave him alone." Her actions disrupted the criminal's coordination just long enough for Bruno to make his move. Despite his unsteady legs, the police dog launched himself at the man with the tranquilizer gun, bringing him down in a tackle that would have made his training officers proud. The weapon went flying, landing somewhere in the thick underbrush. Rex, seeing his ally join the fight, redoubled his efforts against his own opponent. The old German Shepherd's experience showed in the way he conserved his energy while maintaining control of the situation. He had shifted his grip to the man's throat, applying just enough pressure to keep him subdued without causing permanent injury. Officer Martinez was slowly regaining more of his faculties. The adrenaline of seeing his K-9 partner in danger was helping him fight through the lingering effects of whatever drug had been used on him. He managed to draw his service weapon, though his hands were still shaking from the chemical's influence. "Police! Nobody move!" Martinez called out, his voice getting stronger with each word. "You're all under arrest." The third criminal, who had been moving to flank their position, suddenly stopped and raised his hands. The arrival of the helicopters, now clearly visible through the forest canopy, had changed the tactical situation completely. What had been an isolated incident in the wilderness was now about to become a major law enforcement operation. The lead helicopter began circling the clearing, and Sarah could see tactical officers preparing to rappel down ropes. The cavalry had arrived, but the most crucial moments of the confrontation had been handled by a brave 12-year-old girl and two determined dogs, one retired and one still recovering from being drugged. Rex finally released his grip on the criminal he had been fighting, backing away while keeping the man under visual surveillance. The old dog's sides were heaving with exhaustion, but his eyes remained alert and focused. He had done exactly what his training and instincts demanded: protect the innocent and neutralize the threat. Bruno managed to keep his opponent pinned until the first tactical officers reached the ground and took control of the situation. The police dog's determination to perform his duty, even while still affected by drugs, impressed everyone who witnessed it. Sarah ran to Rex, dropping to her knees beside her exhausted companion. "You did it, old boy," she whispered, hugging him gently. "You saved everyone." As the tactical team secured the three criminals, Officer Martinez slowly got to his feet with help from the arriving paramedics. His first concern was for Bruno, but the K9 officer was already showing signs of recovering, more quickly from whatever substance had been used on them. "How long were we unconscious?" Martinez asked one of the sergeants who had arrived with the helicopter team. "About 4 hours," came the reply. "We've been searching for you since your last radio check failed to come in. If it wasn't for Sarah and Rex finding you and their actions during the attack, this situation could have ended very differently." The criminal that Rex had subdued was identified as Marcus Webb, a former military explosives expert who had been using his skills to help protect illegal drug manufacturing operations. His two companions were also wanted in connection with several violent crimes related to the drug trade. As the paramedics checked everyone for injuries and the effects of the drugs, the full scope of what had happened began to emerge. Officer Martinez and Bruno had discovered the location of a major methamphetamine lab operation hidden deep in the forest. When they moved in to investigate, they had been ambushed and drugged with a powerful sedative designed to keep them unconscious while the criminals decided what to do with them. "They were going to kill us," Martinez told Sarah as the paramedics worked on him. "I heard them talking before I completely lost consciousness. They were waiting for their boss to arrive and give the final order." Sarah felt a chill at the realization of how close Rex's heroic actions had come to preventing a double murder. The old dog had not only saved Officer Martinez and Bruno, but had also disrupted a major criminal operation that had been terrorizing the region for months. The helicopter pilot reported that they had spotted several structures deeper in the forest that matched the description of the drug lab they had been seeking. A full tactical team was being assembled to raid the facility, using the information that Officer Martinez had gathered before his capture. Rex was examined by a veterinarian who arrived with the second helicopter. Despite his age and the physical exertion of the fight, the old dog was pronounced to be in excellent condition with no injuries beyond some minor scrapes. His years of training and his determination to protect Sarah had given him strength that surprised everyone. As the criminals were loaded into helicopters for transport to jail, Sarah realized that this adventure had changed something fundamental in both her and Rex. They had faced real danger together and emerged not just as survivors, but as heroes whose actions had saved lives and helped justice prevail. The helicopter ride back to town was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. She sat between Officer Martinez and Bruno, with Rex lying across her lap, still breathing heavily but alert and proud. Through the aircraft's windows, she could see the forest canopy spreading out below them, and in the distance, smoke rising from what the pilot identified as the drug lab that was now being raided by the tactical team. Officer Martinez, now much more coherent after receiving medical treatment, kept thanking Sarah and praising Rex's actions. "In 15 years of police work, I've never seen anything like what you two did today," he told her over the noise of the helicopter rotors. "Rex fought like a dog half his age, and you showed more courage than most adults would have in that situation." Bruno had recovered remarkably well from the drugs, and Sarah watched with fascination as he and Rex seemed to communicate without words. The two dogs looked at each other with what could only be described as mutual respect, professional recognition between working animals who understood the importance of what they had accomplished together. As they approached Millbrook Valley, Sarah could see crowds gathering at the hospital landing pad. Word of the incident had spread quickly through the small town, and it seemed like half the population had come out to witness the return of their local heroes. Sarah's parents were among the crowd, their faces showing a mixture of pride, relief, and the kind of fear that comes from realizing how much danger their child had actually been in. The landing was smooth, and Sarah was immediately engulfed in her parents' embraces. Her mother was crying, holding both Sarah and Rex as if she might never let them go again. Her father, typically more reserved, simply kept repeating, "I'm proud of you," while shaking his head in amazement at what his daughter had accomplished. Local news crews had arrived along with state police investigators, FBI agents, and what seemed like every law enforcement officer in the region. Sarah learned that the drug operation they had helped expose was much larger and more dangerous than anyone had suspected. The lab in the forest had been producing drugs that were being distributed across multiple states, and the criminal organization behind it had been responsible for several murders of people who had threatened to expose them. Detective Linda Ramirez, who was leading the investigation, interviewed Sarah extensively about everything she had observed. The details that Sarah and Rex had gathered, from the tiny puncture wounds to the coordinated movement of the criminals in the forest, provided crucial evidence that would help prosecutors build their case. "You have an extraordinary gift for observation," Detective Ramirez told Sarah. "The information you provided has already helped us identify additional suspects and locate evidence that we might have missed otherwise." Rex became an instant celebrity in Millbrook Valley. The old German Shepherd, who had been quietly enjoying his retirement for years, was suddenly the most famous dog in the region. Veterinarian Dr. Susan Park examined him thoroughly and declared that his actions had probably added years to his life by giving him a sense of purpose and accomplishment that had reinvigorated his entire system. The mayor of Millbrook Valley announced that Rex would receive the town's highest honor for civilian service, making him only the second dog in the town's history to receive such recognition. Sarah would also be honored, but she insisted that Rex deserved the primary credit for their success. Officer Martinez and Bruno made a full recovery from their ordeal, and Martinez returned to duty with a new appreciation for the bond between humans and their canine partners. He visited Sarah and Rex regularly, often bringing Bruno along for what he called professional consultations between the two dogs. The drug lab raid had been a complete success. Law enforcement officers had arrested 12 additional suspects and seized millions of dollars worth of illegal drugs and equipment. Most importantly, they had found evidence linking the operation to other crimes across the region, including the murders that Martinez had mentioned. Sarah's story attracted national attention when it was picked up by major news networks. Interview requests poured in from television shows, magazines, and documentary filmmakers who wanted to tell the story of the brave girl and her elderly dog who had taken down dangerous criminals. But Sarah's parents wisely limited her media exposure to protect her from the overwhelming attention. What impressed everyone most about Sarah was how she handled her newfound fame. She consistently redirected praise toward Rex, emphasizing that the old dog had been the real hero of the story. When reporters asked her if she had been scared, she answered honestly that she had been terrified, but that watching Rex's courage had given her the strength to do what needed to be done. The bond between Sarah and Rex had already been strong, but their shared experience had created something even deeper. Rex seemed to have found new purpose in life, and Sarah had discovered reserves of courage and maturity that surprised even her parents. They had become true partners, united by an experience that few people ever share. Dr. Park, the veterinarian, explained to Sarah's family that Rex's response to the crisis had been a testament to the lasting effects of proper training and the deep emotional bonds that can exist between humans and dogs. Rex didn't just react instinctively, she said. He made strategic decisions based on his training and his love for Sarah. That's the mark of an exceptional animal. The 3 criminals they had helped capture were eventually sentenced to long prison terms. Marcus Webb, the former military explosives expert who had fought with Rex, received the longest sentence due to his leadership role in the operation and his history of violence. During his trial, prosecutors used testimony from Sarah and evidence gathered by Rex to demonstrate the calculated and dangerous nature of the criminal. Enterprise Bruno and Officer Martinez received commendations for their service, with special recognition for their dedication to duty, even while under the influence of drugs. Bruno's determination to continue fighting, despite being chemically impaired, became a textbook example of canine courage that was used in police training programs across the country. The weeks passed and life began to return to normal in Millbrook Valley. Sarah found herself changed in ways she was still discovering. She was more confident, more aware of her own capabilities, and more appreciative of the special relationship she shared with Rex. The old dog, meanwhile, carried himself with a new dignity that everyone could see. He had proven that age and retirement couldn't diminish the heart of a true hero. 6 months after the incident that had changed their lives forever, Sarah and Rex returned to the forest clearing where they had found Officer Martinez and Bruno. The area looked completely different now, peaceful and serene, with no trace of the violence that had occurred there. The criminal's drug lab had been completely dismantled, and the forest was slowly returning to its natural state. Sarah carried a small memorial wreath that she placed near the creek where they had first discovered the unconscious officer and his canine partner. It wasn't a memorial for anyone who had died, but rather a tribute to the moment when everything changed, when an ordinary girl and her aging dog had discovered they were capable of extraordinary courage. Rex moved more slowly now than he had during their heroic adventure, but his eyes still held the same intelligence and determination that had saved lives that October day. The old German Shepherd had become something of a legend in law enforcement circles, with canine training programs across the country using his story as an example of how proper training and deep bonds between handlers and dogs could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The formal ceremony honoring Sarah and Rex had taken place 3 months earlier, attended by officials from the state police, FBI, and local government. Rex had worn a special collar for the occasion, and Sarah had received a citation for civilian heroism that would remain part of her permanent record. But more meaningful to Sarah than any official recognition was the knowledge that their actions had prevented other families from being torn apart by the drug trade they had helped expose. Officer Martinez had kept his promise to visit regularly, often bringing Bruno along for what had become treasured reunions between the two dogs. During these visits, Sarah learned more about the broader impact of their discovery. The criminal organization they had helped dismantle had been operating for over 5 years, and their arrest had led to the identification and capture of drug dealers in 7 different states. "You have no idea how many lives you saved," Martinez told Sarah during one of these visits. "The drugs coming out of that lab were particularly dangerous, more potent than anything we'd seen before. Kids were dying and we couldn't figure out where the supply was coming from." Bruno and Rex had developed an unusual friendship, bonding over their shared experience in a way that amazed everyone who witnessed it. The active police dog seemed to defer to Rex's experience and wisdom, while Rex appeared to enjoy mentoring his younger colleague. Dr. Park, the veterinarian, said she had never seen anything quite like their relationship. Sarah's own life had changed in profound ways that continued to unfold. Her experience had given her a sense of confidence and purpose that influenced everything she did. Her grades improved dramatically as she applied the same focus and determination that had helped her survive the crisis. She had also developed a deep interest in law enforcement and emergency services, spending her free time learning about canine training, search and rescue operations, and criminal investigation techniques. The story of Sarah and Rex had inspired other young people in the community to become more involved in public service. The local fire department reported a surge in applications for their youth volunteer program, and several teenagers had expressed interest in pursuing careers in law enforcement specifically because of Sarah's example. Local schools had incorporated Sarah and Rex's story into their curriculum as an example of civic responsibility and the importance of doing the right thing even when it's difficult or dangerous. Sarah had been invited to speak at several schools, always emphasizing that her courage had come from watching Rex's example and that anyone could find similar strength when it was truly needed. The media attention had gradually faded, which suited Sarah perfectly. She had never enjoyed being in the spotlight and was relieved to return to her normal routine of hiking with Rex and exploring the forests around Millbrook Valley. However, their adventures now included regular visits from other hikers and dog owners who had heard their story and wanted to meet the famous duo. Rex's health had actually improved since the incident, as Dr. Park had predicted. The sense of purpose and accomplishment seemed to have given the old dog new energy and vitality. His arthritis was better managed and his overall demeanor was more alert and engaged than it had been in years. Sarah often joked that Rex had discovered the fountain of youth by becoming a hero. The financial rewards that came with their story had been modest but meaningful. Several news organizations had paid licensing fees to use their story, and a television movie was in development. Sarah's parents had established a college fund with the money, But they had also donated a significant portion to local animal rescue organizations and canine training programs. Detective Ramirez had become a regular part of their extended family, often joining them for hiking trips and helping Sarah understand the complexities of criminal investigation work. She had encouraged Sarah to consider a career in law enforcement, pointing out that her natural observational skills and ability to remain calm under pressure would make her an excellent police officer or detective. The way you noticed those puncture wounds and correctly interpreted the criminal's coordinated movements showed real, investigative instincts, Ramirez told her. Those kinds of skills can't really be taught. You either have them or you don't. As Sarah sat by the creek where their adventure had begun, she reflected on how much her life had changed. She was no longer just an ordinary 12-year-old girl who preferred hiking to social media. She had become someone who understood that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it, and that the bond between humans and animals could transcend anything that criminals or dangers could throw at them. Rex lay beside her in the warm spring sunshine, occasionally lifting his graying head to scan the forest with the automatic vigilance that would never completely leave him. Sarah knew that their heroic days were probably behind them, but she also understood that the lessons they had learned and the bond they had forged would continue to influence their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of returning spring, birds singing and water flowing over rocks, all of it peaceful and natural and safe. Sarah smiled as she watched Rex's ears twitch at familiar sounds, still alert after all these months, still ready to protect her if danger ever threatened again. As they prepared to head home, Sarah noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. Fresh footprints in the soft earth near the creek. Too large to be from any of the regular hikers she knew. Rex had noticed them too, his body language immediately shifting to alert mode as he investigated the tracks. For a moment, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried her through their first adventure. But as Rex completed his investigation and relaxed, she realized the prints were probably from a park ranger or maintenance worker. Not every mysterious sign in the forest led to danger and criminals. Still, as they walked back toward town, Sarah found herself thinking that she and Rex would be ready if adventure ever called again. They had proven that age, size, and inexperience were no match for courage, intelligence, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her loyal companion. Their story had become part of Millbrook Valley's history, inspiring a new generation of young people to believe that heroes could come from anywhere, even from a quiet girl and her elderly dog who simply refused to walk away when people needed help. And in the end, Sarah realized, that might be the most important lesson of all.